Well, welcome aboard another Memphis drawing as we continue our adventure, trying to finish all 200 prompts in our 200 prompt book. Today's prompt is number 159, and it is inside your refrigerator. We cheated a little bit. I think they wanted us to draw all the food and stuff inside a refrigerator, but that's not what the prompt said. So we drew the guts of the refrigerator. Showed the condenser and the evaporator and pump and all that stuff. If you want to see how we did it, stay tuned. Well, guys, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. What they want you to do with inside your refrigerator, I can only guess, is to draw the inside of your refrigerator and with all the food in there and all that stuff. I just having trouble making myself excited for that plan. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do, but I'm going to maybe extend the challenge a little bit and put I'm going to include the inner workings of a refrigerator. Okay, that'll be the side view. Let me include the door. And then there's usually some kind of a handle. I think this is what they want you to do. Something like this, only, colored in and put more detail in it. And I've been trying to make that fly in my mind. I even took a photograph of the inside of my refrigerator, but I just didn't see anything interesting there. I think in our drawing, we'll still put some ketchup bottles in there and, and salad dressing and jalapenos. And you gotta have a jug of milk. You gotta have a can of beer. All that kind of stuff. But we're going to include the mechanisms that you don't see, the mechanics that you don't see on the inside. Yeah, I got my let me zoom you out a little bit. I don't think That's out. That's got the refrigerator kind of outlined here. We're looking at it from the side. How it works is there's a thing called a compressor, and it compresses a gas and turns it into a liquid. The gas they used to use, they've used lots of different things. You know, at one time they actually used well, you know, not chlorine, but well, they've used some pretty noxious gases. The only the criteria for this, the gas they use, it has to ammonia. They used to use ammonia, and then they used what is CFCs or something. Freon, it was called. The trick is it has to be a gas that you can compress down into a liquid, and then it'll expand back into a gas. So that's the compressor. Then the compressor pumps the fluid. And these compressors are kind of interesting. You have to look it up if you really get into it, but they are sealed units, and they're real quiet. That was one of the problems with making refrigerators back in the day. Until this sealed pump was invented. It's got little pistons that go up and down. It's kind of a rotary kind of deal, and it's all sealed. If you ever tried to take one of these apart, it's anything's possible, but that is a tough way to go. So then the fluid the high pressure gas is pumped up, and there in the back of your refrigerator, you'll see it looks like a not like a car radio, but a radiator, but it's got a lot of long tubes and a lot of long fins, and that is the they call that the condenser. Let me draw that condenser in. So the high pressure gas comes out of the compressor, goes through this radiator here. This is called a condenser. I'll write that in. then it gives up all its heat. That's the reason you can't, you can't leave a refrigerator in like a real closed space, or, you put it in, it has to have some air circulation, because this is where the heat from the inside of the refrigerator is transferred to the outside. So by the time the high pressure gas gets to the top of the condenser, it is converted it changes into a liquid, because it's lost it's lost heat, and so now it turns into a liquid. And then it goes through a little valve which is it's going from, and this is called the expansion valve. Now this is going from a high volume here to is concentrated into a liquid, but then it goes through a real small opening, and it expands back into a gas. And when it does that, it gets real cold. So now we get this cold gas going into the freezer compartment. Let me draw the next component, which is the evaporator. So the Freon comes out of the expansion valve and then goes into the freezer compartment, and it's real cold when it expands, well below zero, and it picks up heat in the freezer compartment. The difference, the delta between the ambient temperature inside the freezer box and this right here, the heat will migrate to the gas in this evaporator and be carried away, then out of the refrigerator, and then down in another tube here, and back into the compressor, where it's recompressed and the whole cycle continues. Now, in our refrigerators we have at home, normally there's only one evaporator and one compressor, but you got two different zones. You have the freezer compartment, and then you got the refrigeration compartment. This is usually kept 35, 37 degrees, and the freezer compartment is kept at about 0 Fahrenheit. That would be in Fahrenheit. Now they're connected by ventilation ducts between, and if you look in the back of your refrigerator, you'll see a fin box back there that seems to go through and into the freezer part. And what happens is there's air circulation between the refrigeration section and the freezer compartment, and there's airflow between them. And most refrigerators and freezers have you know, an automatic defrost function. That's included in this too. So there's fans and flapper valves and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, what you got to make sure on your refrigerator is there's a bunch of vents and stuff in the back of your freezer. You'll notice you don't want to put food up against them, because then it won't let air flow into the refrigeration part. So that's basically how it works. Let me draw in some more detail here. Let's put a shelf in. And of course, they're all controlled by computers now, which is normal. You notice on your crisper tray, your vegetable bin at the bottom, you notice that sometimes they have it's like they have a dent here that's at an angle, and that's usually because it's making room for the mechanism in the back. A couple of days ago, I in a video we did, I said I was rambling about something that I probably didn't really know anything about, and it occurred to me that it didn't really matter what I said, because by this time nobody would be watching. And I said, if you're still watching, put it in the comments. And sure enough, somebody was watching, so that's interesting. Okay, let me, the prompt was inside your refrigerator, see? Inside your refrigerator. Well, this is kind of, I mean, we're looking inside my refrigerator, so I don't know. I would think we're kind of fulfilling the goal. I don't want to fail the assignment. Okay, let me see if I can mess this up by well, that evaporator looks like a blind man did it. I'm going to start over on the evaporator. Let's at least make it neat. I will cut you off. Take my retest here and bring you back. When I was in college, one summer I worked in a factory that made the glass in refrigerators for the glass shelves. We'd get that glass. We didn't actually make the glass. What we did is we finished it. We cut it to size and put and ground down the edge, and you'll notice that glass has, the edge of it has been rounded over so it won't cut you. And we had big machines. We had big machines that did that. And, it just, what that job taught me was that everything you see has been manufactured. There's a factory somewhere that does it. We don't even think about it. Okay, I think I'm going to leave the food out of this. I think I'm just going to kind of make it look like a little schematic drawing. Instead of doing these freehand, I think I'm gonna, since we're kind of making it look like a make it kind of look like one of those how does it work sketches. We'll kind of make it give it that drafting board look. If I get my ink pen to work. refrigerators were a big deal. They invented refrigerators. And, you know, back in even in the early part of the 20th century, people had ice boxes. They had refrigeration plants, you know, that made the ice if you didn't live in a cold climate. If you live in a cold climate, then they would cut the ice out of the lake, put it in a big insulated warehouse, and then sell it throughout the year. But in non-cold climates, you had to make your own ice, or you had to make ice. And so they had big refrigeration plants in I think an homage to those plants was included in Back to the Future 3 when Doc Brown. Remember when Doc Brown made the two cruddy looking ice cubes from that giant machine? Well, that's what they were. They didn't have these tiny little almost silent compressors back then. They just had giant piston engines driving big pumps that compressed the Freon, and then they would make the ice that way. Of course, if you lived out in the country, you just didn't have any refrigeration. You depended on they call them root cellars, which was basically, just a hole in the ground that if you dug it deep enough and kept the air out of it, it would keep things from, it would keep the temperature down to some reasonable levels, probably, in the 60s or 70s, but that beats 90. And then they had dry meat. A lot of the things we eat today, like bacon and ham and all that stuff, were really the outgrowth of the curing process they had. They would smoke. They would smoke meat. And salt it. Can it. But all these back to nature people need to think about what happened when they came up with electricity. Alternating current, 110 volts right into your house. I'll tell you what they did. 99.9% of all those farmers out there who are living off grid got on grid. You know, now that off-grid living fad is, I think the people that really did live off-grid, which was everybody back then, would laugh at the fad today. Because it wasn't that great. It's the first thing people did when they put that power line in. And they went down the line and asked you if you want to get hooked up. Every one of them said yes. I think it's kind of funny. I was watching some one of those off-grid guys, and he was talking about how he was heating the house with wood or solar or whatever he was heating it with, and you know, and he's using 12-volt batteries connected to a wind turbine and all this stuff. Which all this stuff costs money, of course. And you know, and he'd cut his power use down to almost nothing. I don't know if he thought about it, but if you cut your power use almost down to almost nothing, most of these off-grid guys, if they cut their power usage down to the amount there would be allowed in off-grid, the cheapest power source would be the electric power lines that go by their house. But I guess nobody thinks of that. But if you think about it, you know what? If you reduce your power down to the amount that you would use off-grid and then bought that power from the utility, you would make out much better. Now, I'm not naive or gullible, and I know that the power companies, that's the reason the power companies have a minimum payment. Like, they have like a surcharge. Power companies I know about anyway. They don't just start you from zero every month. They start you from $30 and go up from there based on your rate. Now, if you lived in a place where all they did was charge you for the electricity you used, you could make out like a bandit. I lived in when I was a kid, I lived in a house way out in the country. And you know, it'd been wired. This was 1962, and it had been wired probably 40 years before that, or 30 years before that. And we used so little power that I don't think the power company, I don't remember my parents ever paying a bill. The power company, I don't think they even checked our, back then power company sent a guy around to read the meters. He was a meter reader. They don't have them anymore, I don't think. You either turn in your own reading or it's automatically transmitted from your meter. But what I figure is we use so little power that they just came and read our meter every now and then. Probably just to make sure we weren't using any power, because we weren't. You know, we had a couple of light bulbs, one in the kitchen, one in the living room. A plug-in, had an old black and white TV. And that was basically the power. I'll tell you what, 2 TVs and a light bulb, or 2 light bulbs and TV, don't use much power. And I'd be backing up. I'd be backing up if I was going to power those with my privately funded hydroelectric system. I did live in a house one time when I was a kid. So my father was working in Colorado. And the house was an old ranch house. And before the power lines were put in, he had his own generator in the basement. But I guess the thing that bugs me the most about the off-grid mentality I mean, from a logical standpoint, I mean, if you're into it, you're into it. You know, more power to you. But it's like they haven't thought it through or something. And the reason I say that is because the only grid they're really getting off of is the commercial power grid, which is the most efficient probably of all the grids. You know, you think about it, we've got communication grids, telephones, computers, internets, radios, televisions. You know, that is a grid of its own. And they don't turn their back on that. What about the transportation grid? Roads, highways, streets, airplanes, boats. Well, they'll take advantage of that grid. What about the supply grid? You know, that whole infrastructure of, you know, building, ordering some new solar panels. Over the communication grid, the manufacturing infrastructure to make the things, the transportation grid to deliver them to your door. Oh yeah, but I make my own power with those. I'm off grid, and I get my water out of a well, and my pump is powered by batteries that I keep charged with a wind turbine. So I'm off grid. I say, you're not off grid. You just think you're off grid. You're off the electric grid, sort of. Another thing I think people forget about was that all those people lived off grid in the 18th and 19th, well, all the people who ever lived up until about the 20th century, they all lived off grid. But it made them extremely practical and common sense. They used You know, they use candles. They use candles because it was better than a lamp with lard in it. They changed to kerosene lamps because it was better than candles. And you better believe it, when they came up with electric lights, those practical people didn't say, oh, I'm going to be off grid. No way. They're practical people. They didn't have their heads in the clouds, trying to prove some kind of point. They embraced whatever, if it was better, they adopted it. Just like the uncontacted people we've discovered all over the world over history. Every one of them will instantly adopt all technology that that is better than what they have. Some of it's not better is the deal. You gotta look at it that way too. We've adopted plenty of things from contacted people. I don't know why, but these compressors are always colored black, and so is the condenser and the gas lines. They're always painted black, kind of a gloss black. Now, modern refrigerators, of course, have they've got automatic defrosting, and that's up in this fan box here, all that mechanism. And I've got ice, you got ice makers up in there. What they do is they take some of this coolant and they cool a couple of ice trays in the back of the machine, and when the ice freezes, a timer flips them over and puts them into the scooper. I hope we have a good prompt for tomorrow, as I haven't this one hadn't been as satisfying as I hoped it would be. And what makes matters worse, I guess it shows what a narrow person I am. I'm disappointed my coffee's not better. I tried a different brand today. Some acid reduced coffee. I think it's called Kava. And you're getting old when you start drinking acid reduced coffee. But if you're still watching this, tell me what you think about off-gridders in the comments. I guess the reason I'm animated about it is because my dad, who of course had been dead for a long time, when I was a kid, he retired, got hurt on the job, and kind of retired early. We moved to a farm, and I think he had visions of going back to nature and raising his own food, and the whole thing. Well, those visions evaporated quick. Because the fact is, small farms don't really work that well. And they probably never have. I'm not an economist or anything, but I think about all farmers, they're always looking for other ways to make a living. When I was a kid, every farmer I knew had secondary employment. They were the big farmers, doing thousands of acres or hundreds of acres back then. And they could make it. But when you're talking about supporting a family with 50 acres or 100 acres on the side of a hillside, it just ain't gonna work. I mean, even if you raise your own food, you're probably not going to, you can't raise your own coffee, your own cotton, your own wool, your own plastic. You know, you gotta have regular money coming in. Okay, in the comments, I want you to opine about whether or not we completed this prompt, you know, in a legitimate way. We kind of, you know, we kind of because we didn't want to we didn't like the prompt, we mealy-mouthed our way through it. Is one argument. Or we rationalized our way through it. Yeah, that'd be a better word. And the other side of the argument is, I guess, that technically the prompt was inside your refrigerator, and that's what we did. We outlined the equipment inside our refrigerator. Let's try to put a silver handle on it. Silver color, but you can see the silver doesn't show up, but we'll put it on there anyway. It just looks like light, you know, light black. Put a silver on this thermostat. Well, that does it for Memphis drawing 159. Today's prompt was inside your refrigerator. We rationalized because we didn't want to do what they really wanted us to do, and we just drew up a diagram of the inside of a refrigerator. The evaporator, the condenser, the pump. There's the vegetable crisper. Hope it's not too disappointing. Hey, let's take a look at tomorrow's prompt. It'll be 160, and it is first place ribbon. Hope to see you then.